Episode 247, Living in Overflow with Tanya Hale.
Welcome to Latter-day Life Coaches, the podcast where each episode is a conversation between me, Heather Rackham, and one of my amazing coach colleagues. Each coach here is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a highly trained, experienced life coach making a great impact in the lives of their clients. And together, we have one main goal, helping you live your best life no matter what. You ready for this conversation with a coach? Here we go.
In this empowering episode, Heather welcomes returning guest Tanya Hale, a certified coach and podcast host, to explore the transformational idea of living in overflow, not depletion. Tanya challenges the traditional fill your bucket just to empty it again mindset and introduces a refreshing, soul-centered alternative. What if we were meant to live full, whole, and spiritually grounded so that our overflow is what blesses others? Through personal stories, gospel reflections, and energy mindset tools, Tanya teaches how to reclaim emotional energy, celebrate yourself without guilt, and show up in relationships as a true equal. This conversation is especially powerful for women who have been conditioned to give at their own expense and are ready to unlearn patterns of scarcity. Please enjoy.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast today. We are super happy to have you with us, and I am happy to be joined by Coach Tanya Hale. Hey, Tanya, how you doing?
Hi. Oh, I'm doing so great. Thank you, Heather.
Good. Yeah, thank you. Tanya and I have just been visiting and before we hit record. And anyway, life is great and life always brings unexpected surprises and pleasures, and it's so fun to hear of those in other people's lives too. So anyway, Tanya has a great story, and I'm sure maybe pieces of that will come out while we're talking today. Tanya's been on before, but Tanya, before we do get started in today's conversation, can you share with people just a little bit about you and we'll go from there?
Absolutely. So I have been a coach through the Life Coach School for a little over 6 years. And at the time that I became a coach, I was divorced. I had been married previously for 24 years. And I started off doing divorce coaching and working mostly with that. And I still love divorce coaching. I love working with people who are in the throes of any element of divorce, thinking about it, in the middle of it, afterwards, trying to figure that out. It's such a complex, difficult decision and time of life. And I love that element. And then 3 years ago, I got remarried. And applying these tools to a marriage has been the most delightful experience of my life. And being able to create the kind of relationship that really you dream about, but you think, do people really have that? And I just feel like we do. And we're both committed to using the tools and implementing the concepts. And so now once I started doing that on my podcast, I started getting people who would call me and say, okay, I don't want to get divorced, but I don't know how to handle this tough relationship. And so then I started doing some relationship coaching as well. And so at this point, I do divorce coaching, I do tough relationship coaching, and I even do some couples coaching, which I started doing about a year ago, which has been a challenge to be sure, but just so incredible to be able to work with both a husband and a wife in figuring out how they can communicate better, how they can work together and really become equal partners. It's been a delight. It's been such an incredible journey for me to do this coaching thing. So,
oh, I love hearing that. I love hearing what people are doing in their own practices. And I'm always so grateful that we have people like you and coaches in the world to help us, navigate all the twists and turns and ups and downs that life seems to bring to us. So
a lot of
anyway,
them.
yeah. Yeah, there is. And just when you think you get it figured out, something else seems to happen. But it's interesting that I've discovered, and I'm sure saying you will say the same, but you kind of get a foundation of tools like we teach as coaches. And the next time you go through something, it's still unsettling and a little unnerving, but you have a different foundation and different place to operate from. And it looks and feels a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah, I just have been amazed over the years how my capacity to show up
Hmm.
more in alignment with the person that I really want to be has just grown and grown and grown and become more and more natural over time. At first
Right.
it felt like I was like having to, really struggle and hold on tight to show up the way that I wanted, to manage my mind, to not say that thing, and over time there is, as with any skill, I've been able to practice and practice and practice. And now so many of these tools are so much easier for me to implement. And boy, it just creates a different kind of life when you put in the work to learn the skills.
Yeah.
So
For sure. I don't know why this is coming to my mind, but you know, if I take have you taken any personality tests or anything recent? I don't know. Some of, like I'm always like, oh, I want
yeah.
to take this test and see what this says. And it's so interesting to take those tests now because I'm like, do I answer this as me today or as me from like 10 years ago? Because
Yeah.
it would be very different. And it's pretty fascinating to see the growth that has taken place and continues to take place
Yeah.
because of a different mindset and experiences and the way I've worked through them.
Yeah. I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have a fun conversation, I think, ahead of us. We often talk about people will like the bucket concept. Is your bucket full? Is your bucket empty? Have you filled your bucket? That sort of thing, so that we can we have this concept like keep your bucket full so that you can pour it into others. But I think that idea kind of comes from an angle that's not necessarily always helpful. And I'm curious how you would say your understanding of filling up and giving out, filling our buckets and giving it has evolved over time.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, when I was a young mom, in the 90s, this idea of the bucket was huge, right? Like,
Hmm.
but it failed. As I look back on it, it was such a hustle mentality. You gotta hustle to get your bucket full just to empty it out again. And then before you hit rock bottom and you're scraping the dregs, you gotta hustle, hustle, hustle to do something to fill it up. And it just felt like it was this constant scarcity mindset of I got to keep it full. I got to keep it full. And yet so many things were needing my time, my children, my spouse, my ex-husband was in the military, so we were always had things going on there. And it just felt like this constant hustle. And I've never really loved that, but I just kind of accepted for a lot of years that that's what it was because that's what I had been told.
Mm.
And a few years ago, I heard Oprah Winfrey give this quote that just rocked my world and shifted everything for me. And she said, I used to fear hearing the term, who do you think you are? Or you must be pretty full of yourself. Now I work at being full. I want to be so full, I am overflowing. So when you see me coming, it ought to make you proud. What you see is a woman so full, I'm overflowing with enough to share with everyone else.
Mm.
And I heard that and I was like, what? That changes everything. And as I've worked on this over the last few years and thought about this, I think of this space of having a full bucket. What if I'm always full? What if I am whole in that sense, spiritually whole, emotionally whole? Because I'm full and I'm not having to do this hustle to try and prove myself or build myself back up or come back to a sense of wholeness. What if I have such an abundance of who I am and of what I'm meant to do and of how I want to engage in the world that I am overflowing? And I love the idea that what is in the bucket is for me. That keeps me whole. What overflows is for everybody else. That is what I have to give the world is my sense of overflow, all of that. And so living in this abundant space that says my life is full, I am whole, and I have enough to share and to give with everyone else. And then figuring out, okay, how do I get to that space? So anyway, that's where this whole idea kind of was birthed for me. And I'm kind of obsessed with it, to be honest with you.
Well, as you should be, because I think it's a real number one, like I think it's easier for us to grasp onto concepts when we have a visual, you know? So when you can imagine a bucket, and we've all had that experience of pouring from it and having an empty bucket, or having a bucket be so empty you can't carry it, or not, sorry, not empty, but a bucket so full you can't carry it, that, or, you know, you're carrying a bucket that's full of water and it's lapping out and falling down the sides. I think it's such a great visual. We can all we can all relate to that in some way, if not necessarily in the terms that you're speaking of, but we can relate to it visually, and so then it helps us be able to, I don't know, relate to it in the terms that you are speaking of. I'm curious then, how you do that. Like, how do you keep that bucket full? How, I mean, I think that's a really hard thing for moms to do, or that feels hard. But how do we do that?
So let me give you another kind of little analogy that I use along with this that helps. I like to think of things like on a scale of how many units of energy does it take me to fill in the blank, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like let's just use something simple like to do the dishes. Let's say that it takes me 3 units of energy to do the dishes and to get the kitchen clean, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when that's done, I'm down 3 units. And how I respond to that can be a place that either keeps me at a -3 units, or maybe it just brings me up to a normal, or maybe it puts me in a space of overflow. So if I finish those dishes at and I go, ugh, hate that job. Just so glad that's done. That really kind of keeps me at that negative, that
Mm-hmm.
-3 units of what it took to do the dishes. I don't feel gratitude. I don't feel self pride and respect. I don't feel, any of that kind of stuff. So I can move in the space that says, ugh, I'm just so glad that stupid job is done. I hate doing dishes. Or I can say, well, that's done. Glad I got that done. And come out maybe kind of neutral. But I could also go into the space that says, you know what? I'm a freaking rock star. Look at me taking care of business. Tomorrow, Tanya is going to be so glad she doesn't have to wake up to a dirty kitchen. And celebrate the fact that I am living the way that I want to. And then maybe I get those 3 units back, plus maybe I get a unit or two over that, because I've moved into this space of creating a stronger sense of self, building my self-respect, moving into the space that says, look at me doing great things in the world. And so what if it took me 3 units to do those dishes, but what if I get 5 units back? Because I not only do it, but then I also recognize my growth, my development, my discipline. And I celebrate those. So what if I get 5 units back? Well, then I'm at a +2, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think when we start applying this to everything we do in our lives, maybe a tough conversation with a kid, maybe that conversation takes 8 units of energy. But maybe I show up like a freaking rock star. And I just at the end, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was how I wanted to show up. And I showed up loving, I showed up kind, I showed up forgiving. I asked, I circled back around and asked for forgiveness. And at the end, we're like, oh, just feel so good about how that turned out. And so what if I get 12 units back on that? That's a +4. That puts me then in a space where a difficult situation is actually giving me more back than what it took for me to engage in that in the first place. And so this is kind of how I imagine this space of feeling ourselves up to become whole, to become full, and even getting to a space where I have this overflow, this place where I can always have extra to give and to share.
And it, like, no extra energy, to be honest, like actually less energy, because I feel like it takes less energy to acknowledge and be happy about something than it does to be like, oh, that was miserable, glad it's done.
Yeah.
Like, I think sometimes we hear concepts like filling our bucket, and obviously you're debunking the way that we think about that, right? You're trying to help us see a different way. It does feel overwhelming to us because we're like, oh, I don't have time to even add one more thing to my quote unquote bucket. But this is just like, oh no, like looking at the things you're already doing and just doing it with a different energy versus, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? The kind of the fallback, the one that can be easy for us just to think, oh, I should, it's miserable, but I got it done, when that actually is takes more energy than the opposite.
Yeah. And I think for some people more than others, for various
Yeah.
reasons, it takes more intentional mindset work to
Hmm.
move ourselves where we need to go. Some people are really good at celebrating themselves, and this is going to come more easy. Some people aren't for whatever reason, whether it's genetic or whether it's, societal, how they grew up, nature, nurture kind of stuff. I don't know. But I think when we really focus on intentionally choosing, how do I think and how do I engage? And, even these tools help us to do this so much, that all the tools that we learn on this podcast and that I teach, with the life coaching stuff that I do, they're just tools that help me show up in a way that feels in alignment with who I am. And that always moves me into a space of overflow, a space of receiving more than I want. And I think a huge part of that is learning to listen to my spirit. I think we need to listen to the spirit that God gives us. And I think we need to listen to my spirit, because there are things that will happen in the world that will speak to my spirit. But there are also things that my spirit wants to say, ways that my spirit wants to engage in the world, because I believe that my spirit knows what I'm capable of. My spirit knows my possibility. And if I can learn to listen to my spirit, and through the way I engage, and through the way I create, and through the way that I contribute to the world, I can be doing things that nurture my spirit, that engage me in this place of overflow. And it might be different for all of us. I know for me, these coaching tools, every time I get off a coaching call with a client, I feel like I'm in this place of overflow. I feel like I am doing what God has created me to do. I feel like I'm contributing to the world in just an incredibly amazing way. And it puts me in overflow. Other people, this might be super, super difficult for them, right?
Hmm.
But they have talents and abilities that speak to their spirit, and that their spirit wants to speak in different ways that will create overflow for them. And so I think really learning to connect with our spirit and with what we feel drawn to, like with what calls us, is such an important part of being able to start filling our bucket till we're whole and even
Hmm.
overflowing. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, our spirit is like directly connected to our heavenly parents, and I'm just always thinking that they are always trying to show us what we are capable of, and our spirit then is trying to show us that because it's connected to our heavenly parents, right? So if we can listen to that intuition, that inner self that we have, our spirit, it is like always trying to point us in the direction of overflow, in to show us what we're capable of, to prove to us how, you know, what's inside of us already, and
yeah,
what we can create from that space.
I agree with that, because I don't think God wants us living in this space of up and down of our bucket. I don't think he wants us constantly in this hustle of, am I enough? Am I not enough? Do I have enough? Do I not have enough? Like I feel like I'm giving so much and now I have to like check out of the world for 4 days just to recoup. And I don't think he wants us living in that space. And when I think about Jesus Christ, there were self-care things that Jesus Christ did, but he didn't ever have, that we know of, that breakdown space where he was running on empty. He was always about his father's business. He was doing what he was called to do. He was following his spirit's divine mission.
Mhm.
And in so doing, it put him in that place of abundant overflow where he could do the work that he needed to do. And he could always be available to give and to serve in the ways that he was needed for his calling.
Yeah, for sure. I love to read the scriptures, and eh, especially New Testament scripture, and try to find phrases in there where Jesus is speaking kindly of himself and like recognizing who he really is, which is almost every sudden, every statement he recognizes who he is. But if we could do the same thing and recognize that divinity that we have in us. So this brings up another question for me. I heard one of the things you said was, learning to celebrate ourselves. And my mind comes back to the elementary playground. If somebody would say something good about themselves, like friends would be like, "Oh, quit bragging. It's not good to brag."
Yeah.
And I've heard that statement from, my little people as they've grown older. And obviously it's something that I must have taught them. I don't know. They pick it up someplace, right? That we're not supposed to be excited about ourselves and what we're doing. But how do we walk that line then? Some people would be like, "Oh, I can't celebrate myself. Like that would be prideful. That would be bragging." What is that line there?
I think the line is comparison. I think as soon as I start comparing myself to others and seeing myself as better than or less than,
Mhm.
I think that that's where we cross that line. And so, as Oprah Winfrey said in that quote, being so full of yourself, that she was always afraid of people saying, "Oh, you're so full of yourself," because that was a phrase, for me
Yeah.
in the 70s and 80s, you're stuck up, you're conceited, like all of these things. And yeah, I think we were raised, especially as women, we were taught that that is not okay. Like if you're going to be a person of worth, if you are going to be worthy of love, you cannot be any of that.
Hmm.
And, and I think we confuse that with thinking that we then had to be self-deprecating and we had to always talk down. "Oh no, I'm not. Well, you do this really great. Oh, I don't really do it so well," right? Like always having to put ourselves down into a place that we didn't really belong. And so being able to say, when someone gives us a compliment, being able to say, "Thank you. I'm thank you for noticing that. I've been working really hard on that." There's such a difference there between saying, "I know I'm so much better than everybody else." And so it's for me, it's that comparison place. If I can recognize that I'm great at something, that I'm good at something, that I have a talent or ability or skill in one area, I think that's important for us to be able to do. And keep it out of the space of comparison, because comparison is that line that crosses the boundary every time, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. And I'm also, just as a side note, we've all had conversations with people where they've talked, harshly about themselves, or, "Oh no, I'm not good at that," if someone's offered them
Yeah.
a compliment. And think of how that feels when you're the person who's offered the compliment and then someone, denies it in some way. Like that puts a burden on them, on you to have to like try to build that person up. And that's not very comfortable, I mean, of course we want to build somebody up, but I just think it's so interesting that we do that in our personal lives, in conversations where we make it somebody else's responsibility to then try to prove to us that we are better than we think we are. And what a great place it is. What a great example it is just to be able to show people it's okay to just say thank you, like you said, "Thank you for noticing," or whatever it is. Like that's so easy. That leaves everybody in a lighter place because no one's had to try to prove something to somebody, and we're just able to experience the happiness in that moment
And
and move forward.
I think being able to move into the space that just says, "Wow, thank you,"
Yeah.
gives us that extra couple of points that may bump us into overflow,
Yeah.
right? That just that ability to do that rather than deflecting and saying, "Oh no, I'm not really that good." You know, I, that's just, that takes energy from us to do that. Whereas just being able to say thank you, I think
Yeah.
creates energy. I think that puts us in that space of overflow, which is so important.
For you and for the other person, I feel like as well,
Absolutely. Oh,
right?
I
Because
agree. Yeah.
it's hard to try to prove to somebody something that they're not willing to see in themselves, right? If you're sitting there trying to say, "Oh no, you're really good at that." Like that is they're never going to believe you if they don't believe it themselves. So it gets very exhausting. So I think I don't know, it's hard for everybody when we're unable to accept a compliment and be grateful and experience it that way.
love that you brought that up because I think that that's a way that we can help other people step into overflow as well,
Hmm.
right? Because if I offer you a compliment and you go, wow, thank you, that feels good to me.
Yeah.
If you say, no, that's not true, then I think, what do I not see this clearly? Is she
Yes.
me a liar? Like, then I can start questioning myself, questioning my capacity to see clearly. But if you just say, wow, thank you, that feels good to me because I'm able to go, like I added something positive to the world. And maybe that puts me maybe that gives me a couple of points of overflow as well.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
maybe we help to create overflow in other people as well. I haven't really looked at it in that context, but I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, I guess I'm just reflecting on conversations that I've had where I felt like the burden's been put on me to prove to somebody, what
Yeah.
they're denying to see in themselves. And anyway, I'm just thinking about that. It feels good when somebody can just accept what you see in them and be willing to be willing to see that themselves. So how have you seen your own overflow impact other people? And I guess this kind of a little bit like what we just talked about a little bit reflects that, right? Is you can experience your own overflow. It does impact other people, but I'm curious how you've seen it specifically in your life.
I think in a lot of ways, I think it gives me the freedom to show up the way that I want to and not be fearful of what it's going to take from me.
Mm,
It gives me the capacity to say no and also the capacity to say yes without beating myself up either way, right? It gives me the capacity to show up as me. What do I want? How do I want to engage in the world? How do I want to contribute? And I think it really allows me to do that. As I have this overflow, I'm not living in this place of scarcity. I'm living in a place of abundance that says I have more than enough. And that allows me to relax a little bit and to engage more in ways that feel really authentic to me,
hmm.
ways that align with the kind of person that I feel that I am and with the kind of person that I want to be.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And want to like it's giving me my eyes are just scanning outside my windows right now because I'm imagining scanning for opportunities in my own life to practice this and to bring more overflow into my own space. So anyway, you're giving me some great food for thought here. We've talked a little bit about some of the things that maybe would hold us back from being able to feel like we have permission to live in overflow, like maybe concepts of thinking that we're bragging or that we're full of ourselves. But what other things do you think we as women specifically need to unlearn in order to give ourselves permission to live this way?
Such a good question. In a lot of the work that I do with relationships, I see that a huge piece of what we do as women is very often we show up in a one down position, a little bit less than position, a position that says, well, I'm just a supporting role
Hmm.
rather than I am an equal. And I think as we step up, we learn to quiet these voices that say, oh, I need to make myself small so that everybody else feels good. I need to make sure that everybody else is happy. I need to, this constant, um, that's the kind of giving that empties our buckets. When I do not see myself and treat myself as an equal, who also deserves to be happy, who also deserves to have my wants and needs addressed and met. And I think as women, our societal training, I think for me, especially in the 70s and 80s and the 90s, was so much this place of, listen, yeah, you're okay, but you're not as important as everybody else in the story. Your job is to waste and wear out your life in making sure that your husband is taken care of and making sure that your kids have everything that they want. And oftentimes the unwritten part of that was at my own expense,
Hmm.
to the point where I do end up with that empty bucket where I'm scraping the bottom and I'm sobbing in my room because heaven forbid I wouldn't want my kids or my husband to see me crying because that would be uncomfortable for them. And my job is to make sure that everybody's as comfortable and happy as they possibly can be. And so learning to put my wants and needs on the table and say, listen, these aren't more important than yours, but they're also not less important than yours. And learning to show up and be seen and be heard and see ourselves as equals and treat ourselves as equals, I think is such a valuable part of how we can do this. Show up, listen, what I want and need is just as important as what my husband wants and needs. And just as important as what my children want and need. And just as important as, people that I serve in my community or in my church, right? Like what my wants and needs matter just as much. And I think as women, we've just been taught to not even consider what we want. And I think that is partially what creates a lot of dysfunctional behavior in our relationships because we do not show up as equals. And it creates, our marriage relationships as well as our parental and child relationships and as well as other relationships in our lives, just this inability to show up as an equal.
Mm-hmm. And something that I've been learning is that it can be, let's see, it feels uncomfortable to show up as an equal. Like it's sometimes easier to kind of live in that one down position. You don't have to make as many decisions. You don't have to have an opinion. You don't have to, like you can just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah.
And that can be a really comfortable place to be, but growth doesn't come from comfort always.
Right.
And so we learning to have a voice and to put ourselves, to be willing to put our stuff on the table, like you said, even just being able to say, hey, I'm here and I'm equal in this relationship is a really important thing to do, but it's not easy. The results are amazing and worth doing, but it does take it's a skill. It's skills. You have to learn the skills to do it because it doesn't just happen.
Agreed. And we have to start figuring out what it looks like to be an equal because most of us have not seen this modeled in most of our lives.
Yeah.
We do not see it in television or movies. I mean, you look at the sitcoms you may watch or the movies you may watch, there's almost always a one up, one down element that creates the conflict, right? And so we haven't seen it modeled there. Most of us, in our age group anyway, did not see this modeled in our parents' relationships because they were coming out of the 50s and the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
We see it in our grandparents' relationships, nor our good friends' parents. So we just haven't seen it. And it's always amazing to me when I work with someone about a marriage situation that they're struggling with. And we identify that they're either in a one up or a one down position. And for women, it's generally one down, but boy, we have this propensity to go up into one up self-righteousness as well.
Yeah.
And say, and I'm so much better than you because I'm sacrificing all of this. Right?
Yes.
So we do this, but we'll identify a one down or a one up behavior and they'll go, oh yeah, I see that. And I'm like, okay, so what would it look like in this situation to show up as an equal? And 9 times out of 10, my client is like, I have no idea. I don't even know what that would look like. Because we don't think in terms of being equal. It just does not come intuitively because we've never seen it. And so learning how to understand what does it look like to show up as an equal in my marriage relationship? What does it look like to show up as an equal with my adult kids? What does it look like to show up as an equal with my parents, with my friends, in a work situation? Like, what does it look like to show up as an equal? And that's a whole brand new skill set.
Mm-hmm.
We get to learn there as well. We have to start thinking about things differently. And one way that I often talk with my clients about it is, like in a marriage situation, I like to say, I want you to imagine that you are in a 50-50 relationship with a business partner. If you want to take a class because it's going to benefit the business and it's going to do this, you would not show up to that 50-50 business partner and say, oh, I I don't know. I've been thinking like this class might be kind of good, but I don't know. You can say no if you want because it may not be good, but this is what I want to do. And oh, well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe, we wouldn't show up that way. A 50-50 business partner would show up and say, hey, you know what? I found this class and I'm really excited about it. And I think I really want to engage in it because I think it's going to do this and this and this and this for our business. It costs this much money. And I really think it's going to be beneficial. And I'm looking at investing some of our business money to do this. Do you have any thoughts, for me before I go ahead and move in this direction? We would show up as an equal. What I want, what I need matters and it counts. My thought processes matter. My capacity to think and to make good decisions also matters. And I think we forget this. Another example that comes to mind, I always love to think about Eve and Adam in the garden. I love that Eve shows up as an equal. When she's presented with a plan and she thinks it through and she processes it and she goes, oh, wait a minute. I see what's going on here. I see the bigger plan. Okay, I'm going to make this decision. And she felt completely empowered to make that decision all on her own. And then she went and told Adam, hey, by the way, this is the decision that I made. She felt empowered as a woman to show up as an equal. And I think we forget that sometimes. I think we not just forget it. I think we've never been taught that. We've never looked for that and seen that we are created to be equals. And so much of our societal conditioning is, yeah. In fact, I was told as a young woman's at church that when you get married, you and your husband will talk about a decision and then he'll make the final choice because, priesthood and all that.
Right.
And I just was like, okay, that feels really weird, but if that's how it is, that's how it is. Right. So I think so much has been lost over the years.
Yeah. Well, I think even in the story of Adam and Eve that you just shared, I think for so long, the narrative was Eve was deceived,
Yeah.
right? Like it wasn't that she made a decision on her own. It was that she obviously wasn't capable of making a decision on her own
Yeah.
because
Not smart enough.
she was deceived.
Yeah.
Instead of, I believe that narrative 100% to be she figured it out.
Yeah.
She, like to your point, she made a decision and was like, no, this is the decision I need to make. And she had it figured out. She wasn't deceived. And
Yeah.
so I do think that, that narrative has been handed down to us for so long that that is one of the things that we are unlearning, right? Like that we are capable of making decisions, and not only capable, but like we have that capacity and we can figure things out. We were meant to do that. And anyway, so
It's our responsibility to do that.
yes. Yeah.
It's our responsibility to figure out how to show up as equals. And as we do that, I think it absolutely has the potential to put us in more of this space of overflow
Hmm.
because we step into the power that God placed inside of us. And I think a lot of us have just learned to just downplay that power, to ignore it, to kind of push it up and bury it under all this stuff. And now that we're in this place where we can start to unearth this power and start to let it grow and thrive within us, we have this capacity to show up as equals that feels God given. It feels amazing. And that is part of this overflow, I think, as well, is really stepping into what we were created, what and who we were created to be.
Right. Yeah. That's the really important piece, I think, because when we remember who we're created to be, it makes all of it much easier, right? When we remember who created us and whose we are,
Mhm.
it gives us, I think, that courage to
Yeah.
do uncomfortable things and to step into positions that we were always meant to be in. So,
Yeah.
Tanya, thank you. This has been really, I don't know, thought-provoking and insightful for me. And I appreciate you taking the time to share your visions of a overflowing bucket with us. I think it's awesome. Before
Yeah.
we head out today, can you share with people how they can connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a podcast called Intentional Living with Tanya Hale. I've got over 360 podcasts out there at this point, so a lot of content to focus on. I do a lot of divorce and relationship stuff, a lot of midlife, adult child stuff, all the midlife relationship stuff that gets so
Mm-hmm.
tricky and complicated sometimes. I love that. I have a website, tanyahale.com, that people can go to as well. I have a blog there, other content that they can connect with also. And I am on both Instagram and Facebook under Tanya Hale LDS Life Coaching. So,
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate
oh
it.
gosh, thank you. I just love having discussions about things
That matter,
that
right?
matter, that
Yeah.
really change how I view the world and my capacity to show up stronger and better. So,
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it so much. I love to have those conversations too. So, all right, everybody, thank you for joining us today and join us again next week for another conversation about things that matter, that are so
yeah.
important. All right. See you later, everybody. Hey, we just wanted to thank you for spending part of your day here with us at Latter-day Life Coaches and being part of this conversation. Share this with your friends so that you can have a conversation with them on this topic as well. And as always, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Have a good one, my friends.